This episode of SESSLERS Something is brought to you by Unicorn Tears. We don't know what they do, but we know you want them. Well, here we are, 2013. It feels so different, doesn't it? It's like 2012, but it's later. But we're in the first week. We have potential controversies brewing in the game industry. Yay! Actually, one of them's a holdover from 2012, and that was the very, very late year announcement that Tomb Raider, the new Tomb Raider, is going to have multiplayer. Now, there has been some degree of multiplayer in Tomb Raider before, but it was kind of a spin-off game that was downloadable. I believe it's called Lara Croft and the Guardians of Light. This is obviously a reboot of the franchise, and now we find out that there's multiplayer. It's not clear if it's co-op, if it's competitive, if it's a mixture of both, but people seem to be very, very upset. And I do know where this comes from. We've seen more than enough games that historically have always been single-player experiences, and suddenly there's a multiplayer that does feel tacked on, that feels inconsistent with the fiction that's already been established by the game, and just seems kind of unnecessary. Now, if you take a step back, bad multiplayer doesn't really change the quality of the single-player game, but there is that sense that somehow you're taking away from the development of the single-player game. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. And we're seeing more and more cases, in the case of Tomb Raider, this is true, where a separate team is developing it. It's not being done by the core single-player team. And we don't know if the money that was given over for the multiplayer could have been available to overdevelop, to further develop the single-player experience. But once again, those are understandable feelings. And if you really look at how you play multiplayer, it's not the same thing. I see single player as kind of speed dating. You know, you're going to try out a bunch of different people. But when it comes to multiplayer, that's more of a long-term relationship. You know, you stay with it. You want to get better. It's competitive. It's something you want to do over and over again. You want to visit. You want to date over and over again. And with as many multiplayer offerings as there are out there, you see very, very few, especially the new ones, finding traction with a new large group of gamers. Now, there's another thing that just happened this morning, where I saw reported this morning, I believe it's on Game Industry International, that a patent has been discovered that Sony has filed for that would somehow make playing used games either on the current PS3 or maybe on the PS4, whatever it is going to be, absolutely impossible. This has been a simmering anxiety for the past year. People think that Microsoft is also pursuing the same agenda, and I understand people are upset. But at the same time, this does tie into the multiplayer because, remember, game companies, Microsoft, Sony, EA, 2K, they're in it for the money. They need to make a profit. That's how they're going to survive as a business and make games further down the line. And used game sales, I think more so than when this whole controversy erupted back with the music industry and CDs, those used game sales do cut in to their revenue and, of course, their profits. And profit margins on video games are not terribly great unless you have a massive blockbuster like a GTA, maybe like a Borderlands 2, but definitely like a Call of Duty. Then you start to see a lot of money come in. But for most games, those profit margins can be very, very narrow, and losing revenue to the publisher and actually royalties to the developer on used game sales make those margins all the more narrow, and they're trying to find a way that they can make money. And so they're going to want you to be buying the game when it's in its first shrink-wrapped version, because that's how they generate income off of game sales. Now, this plays into the multiplayer. We're going to have tacked on, I don't know if it's going to be tacked on for Tomb Raider, let me just put it out there, but we're going to have instances of multiplayer that we feel is inappropriate in DLC and, you know, day one purchase of DLC, because they're trying to prevent you from returning that game. They need to make the game feel it has a longevity well past the first playthrough experience. And if you don't want the multiplayer, well, you're probably going to have to put up with the non-used game sales. These two things are incompatible. One of them's going to have to be there. So I think everyone needs to sit down and realize that this is a business. This is an industry, and we're going to have to be swallowing more of these bitter pills in the future. So this is like, you know, the third act of the SESSLERS Something. You know, it's a 3-act structure. We introduce it, I talk about something, and now I'm talking to you again. I'm trying to figure out what I want to do with this part, and I've been giving consideration to answering questions from you guys. So right there in the comments section, if you're on YouTube, put in some questions. You know, something you want me to answer. It could pertain to what I just talked about. It could pertain to something that maybe I should be talking about. Don't make it too wordy, because I only have so much time to answer it. But you know, be thoughtful, and maybe we can get even more of a discussion going here. All right, see you next week.